Hello everybody, my name is Brady and I'm a 19th century American historian and we are back with another React video, and today we're going to be continuing the Seminal Tragedy series by Extra History. I'm very excited about this one. I've really been enjoying this series. But before we get started, I do have to give some shoutouts to the new channel members. So thank you to Melcy, Unreliable MC, Sean Gilbride, and Debbie Brooks. Thank you all for becoming channel members. If you want to become a channel member, there is a link in the description box below. So now let's get to the video. Let me pull it up. So as I said already, we are continuing the Seminal Tragedy series. This episode is called The July Crisis. This is an interesting series so far, and I'm curious to how they're going to pace it going forward. I haven't been checking how many episodes are in this. I don't think this is the last one. I think I saw that there was at least one more after this. And I'm curious to what level of depth they're going to go into as we start getting into this. Like the first one was a lot of setup. And that's what they always end up being, it seems. The first one is really set in the ground. Except for the Christmas truce one. That one was pretty darn concise. The other one was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which only is natural. I'm curious to how much depth this one's going to go into. So let's get it started. This should be fun.
The 5th of July, 1914. The Archduke and Duchess are dead. Gavrilo Princip is in jail, but catastrophe is not yet certain. Act 2 begins. We open on an Austrian delegation arriving in Potsdam. It is now a week after the assassination of Franz Ferdinand. The Austrians want to take action. They want war with the Serbs, who they think are behind the group of ragged young men that actually pulled the trigger. But before they can have their war, they decide they must consult with their much stronger ally.
And this is where I start to get really confused, so I'm very excited about them getting into this stuff. Anytime I have this stuff explained to me, I get a little bit confused once we start talking about all the alliances that got pulled into this. Because the web of alliances is really what ends up making this a world war rather than just a regional conflict. So this should be good for me.
The German Empire. So they send a delegation to Potsdam to meet with the Kaiser, Wilhelm II. They've been restrained before by Germany, held back from acting in the Balkans, so they need to know what Germany plans to do. They go to the Kaiser and tell him that this is intolerable, that they cannot abide such a humiliation, that they cannot let this act of terrorism go unpunished. And the Kaiser says to them, "We'll back you whatever you do. Just act and act quickly. Germany is behind you."
I'm very curious about this because I'm a little bit confused about the legitimacy of this. Because we have the group of assassins, which really just seems like a ragtag group. It doesn't seem like they had state sponsorship, at least not from this version of it. I don't know if they had anything else to base it on, or if this is just them working from the gut George W. style. I'm not really sure here. I don't know if that's even completely clear. For those of you who are good at the World War I stuff, you'll always tell me in the comments, and I appreciate the hell out of you for it. Was there anything behind that, or are they about to invade based on false pretenses? Let me know.
Without reservation. The Kaiser thinks that general war can be avoided, that if the Austrians strike while all of Europe is enraged over this assassination, if they act while the brutal slaughter of the Archduke and Duchess is still fresh in people's minds, no one will raise a finger to defend Serbia. And even if the Russian Empire decided that they wanted to protect their Serbian allies, if the Austrians can strike quickly, it'll be a fait accompli. The war will be over before the Russians can mobilize their forces. This is what...
I at least know that. I don't know a lot about Russian history, although I think I'm getting better. I wouldn't consider myself good at it. That is one thing that I don't need to be good at Russian history to know. They take a while to get all their stuff in order. They're a huge country, and they have they're in an interesting place as far as modern development goes. Many would consider them to be a little bit behind.
What he thinks as he tells the Austrian delegation that they have a blank check.
Let me go back 10 seconds.
Serbian allies, if the Austrians can strike quickly, it'll be a fait accompli. The war will be over before the Russians can mobilize their forces. This is what he thinks as he tells the Austrian delegation that they have a blank check, that Germany will back them whatever they do. And then he goes on vacation
Oh,
on a
no.
boat for 3 weeks where he can't be reached.
Oh, literally on a vacation. I thought he was making doing like a metaphor or something. He's literally going out. Okay, that's fine.
The Austrians come home, German assurances in hand, but in Austria there's disagreement. The Hungarian part of their empire initially objects to war. They hope that a peaceful solution might be found, but their voice is alone. Where were the other voices of reason or the other arguments for peace? Dead on the streets of Sarajevo. The Archduke was perhaps the greatest defender of the Serbs in the empire, and so when moderation was called for, the parties for war simply had to point to his death and say, he was their greatest friend, look what they did to him. What do you think they're going to do to us? And all arguments were quelled.
It really does seem like it was short-sighted from the assassins' point of view for what they would have wanted. It seems like this is going to come down on them in a way that it's just even worse than the situation beforehand. I know there are a bunch of young kids basically doing it, but it makes me wonder what they expected to come out of this. Is this really just like an irrational action taken out of anger, not really that well thought out, or did they really think it was going to go another way? I would love to read like a manifesto from those guys if it exists.
So at last, the Hungarians relented on one condition, a condition that'll be important later, that the Austro-Hungarian Empire would not annex a foot of Serbian land. And with that, the Austrians began drafting an ultimatum to Serbia. But this ultimatum is delayed by a chance for peace. Two men, rivals in the heart of Serbia, in Belgrade, the very capital in the center of this crisis, are two of the only men farsighted enough to see the clouds gathering on the edge of Europe. They are the ambassador from Austria and the ambassador from Russia to Serbia. They both have come to the same conclusion about where this storm will end, so they plan to put aside their differences and meet to perhaps work out a plan for peace.
Oh, that's nice.
On the 10th of July, the Russian ambassador arrives at the house of the ambassador from Austria-Hungary. The details are agreed to, the plan is set. All that's left is one final meeting to perhaps smooth out tensions, to avert world war. They talk, they take cigarettes, both sides are open, things are going well, and then wham! The Russian ambassador falls dead of a heart attack.
Oh, jeez. I didn't know about this. In a general sense, most of the stuff that I've heard so far in this series, I'm not really surprised about, or at least I vaguely understood, and maybe I'm learning it a little bit more depth. I had a little bit of a slip there, but you can probably understand why. No, jeez. Talk about, crummy luck.
Eyes are open, things are going well, and then wham! The Russian ambassador falls dead of a heart attack. Nothing signed, no war stopped. The Serbians blame the Austrians. Rumors circulate that they had the Russian ambassador assassinated, that the Austrian ambassador killed him in his own house. Worse still, this leaves the Russians without an ambassador in Serbia. As events begin to accelerate toward war, they have no diplomatic channel at the center of everything, no lines of communication, no eyes or ears on the ground. They have nobody with the experience, connections, or familiarity with Serbia that the former ambassador had to send out. And even if they did, it'd take weeks to get them appointed and shipped from Moscow to Sarajevo. Weeks they don't have.
This is definitely giving a lot more context to something that I vaguely understood. And I think this should probably be emphasized more. I don't know if when you learn it, you hear more about this stuff. That's a story that I have never heard. It usually kind of jumps from the assassination of the Archduke and kind of, it seems like it fast forwards through a lot of the stuff getting into the war, in my experience, learning about this in my formal schooling and stuff. And then they go back into great depth once the war has kind of kicked off a little bit. This is a period that I think is really interesting to learn about. This is cool.
But with this last overture turning to
Scandalous.
catastrophe, the Austrians decide it's finally time to send their ultimatum. But they can't. Again, they delay. You see, President Poincaré, the leader of France, is going to Russia to meet with the Tsar, and the Austrians, ever nervous, decide that they can't send the ultimatum while their two greatest adversaries are meeting together in the same place. It would never do. They could make decisions too quickly. They could coordinate in ways they normally couldn't when they're 1,000 miles apart.
Poincaré, I know him. I actually do. It's interesting, after I finished community college and I went to state college, it was really interesting because the first history paper that I did in the first big history class that I had was on him. And it was difficult. It was not a good paper at all. But I did learn a thing or two about the guy. When this whole situation comes to an end and we start talking about sanctions and Germany having to pay reparations and stuff, he's going to be a loud advocate for the paying of strict reparations. He's going to be one of the big voices here. A lot of people know Clemenceau. I don't know too much about him, but apparently Poincaré had some tendencies that could have been even more extreme than him. So that's a thing. I wouldn't say this is something I know a ton about because I haven't seen that paper in years. And like I said, wasn't a very good paper, but I read a little bit about this guy.
So the Austrians delay. They wait until Poincaré is 100 miles out to sea before sending their ultimatum. But at last, on the 23rd of July, an ultimatum is sent from the Austrians to the Serbs. The Serbs have 48 hours to agree to all points or face war. The ultimatum asks many things, but most of all, it asks that Austrian police be granted free rein to investigate the assassination on Serbian soil. This is impossible. To agree to such a thing is tantamount to giving up sovereignty. No nation would accept this. But that's alright, because the ultimatum is only a ruse anyway, a cover for what the Austrians really want. The Austrians want war. They want the ultimatum to be rejected, because they want to appear to the world as though they gave the Serbs a chance to avoid a conflict.
This is not an abnormal tactic. I've definitely seen this one before. I'm surprised they didn't go a little bit further and demand even more, but I guess, you don't want to give off that. You don't want to give up your image of being reasonable, I suppose, and that makes a whole lot of sense. Give them something they can't accept. Then it's like, oh no, I guess you forced my hand. Not surprising at all.
They want to appear blame-free for the invasion they're planning, and here's where things begin to speed up. Europe begins to boil. Up until this point, the crisis in the Balkans is just another event on the world stage, but all of a sudden, with the release of this ultimatum, people start to clue into what's happening. Powers outside of Austria, Germany, and Serbia begin to pay attention. But for us, we're going to turn our attention to one man, Sergei Sazonov. Sergei Sazonov was the foreign minister of Russia, and for him, the 24th of July is about to be a very, very busy day. In the morning, he wakes to receive the terms of the ultimatum that Austria sent to Serbia. He reads quietly to himself, then turns to an aide and fatefully utters, "It's a European war." A cabinet meeting is hastily assembled. The highest levels of the Russian government are all there. They resolve to ask the Austrians to give the Serbs more time, while at the same time pushing the Serbs not to resist the Austrians. They also make the fateful decision to begin a partial mobilization of their forces along the Austrian border, trying to play all the angles at once in the schizophrenic chaos that seemed all too common in the days just before the war.
So there was already tension with the Serbians. That's something that I find rather interesting here. I'm trying to think of a parallel event, but since there was already this sort of bias against them before this started to go down, it's only natural that they'd be very quick to jump on this, very quick to expect foul play and such. So the more this is explained, the more World War I makes sense. I always looked at it as kind of a senseless war, and even if it makes sense, it doesn't mean it's not a senseless war. It doesn't mean it absolutely should not have happened and that it should have been stopped at a million different steps along the way. But on another hand, I can get it. I understand how it came about.
Now it's noon. Sazonov takes lunch with the French and British ambassador. The French ambassador reiterates France's complete support. The British ambassador says that Britain sympathizes but that he can't make any commitments. Now it's afternoon. The Russian ministers reconvene. With Sazonov confirming the unwavering support of the French, they decide to fully back Serbia, even to the point of war. And now it's evening. Sazonov meets with Portales, the ambassador from Germany. Portales begs Sazonov to call off Russian mobilization. He tells him that there must be solidarity between the monarchies, that they must work together or all fall alone. The argument gets heated. Portales tells Sazonov there will be revolution. Revolution in Europe if the monarchies do not work together. If they don't work together, all of the crowns will fall. And he's right. Within 5 years, all the great monarchies of Europe, true monarchies, monarchies where the monarch was the head of state, would collapse. Within 5 years, the Ottoman Empire,
That's for the best.
Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Russian Empire, and the German Empire would be no more. Their kings dispossessed, thousands of years of monarchical tradition burned away in the fires of cataclysmic war.
USA! USA!
It's one of those small tragedies.
Oh god. I know there's probably a whole lot of tragedy built into it. I know at least a little bit about that, but all I can think is like beat you to it a long time ago. But yeah, that it really is ushering in a new era of modern politics and monarchies of that kind. I don't think they were going to last very long. I think eventually the world was going to catch on to them. And it seemed like they'd already clung on a little longer than I would expect. And it's kind of weird to say that, but yeah, there's nothing shocking about these monarchies going. For some reason, it feels like it was already time. It's just the question is, what way are they going to go? Are they going to be deposed completely? Or are we going to keep kind of a symbolic monarch or a very, very limited monarchs, which they exist today. We have those, and people aren't nearly as pissed off about them because all they do really is uphold this like social tradition that these people are born better than all of you and they have some limited power, but for the most part, they can't really become like full-on dictators, or at least they shouldn't be able to. Very few would probably be willing to try. It would be a pretty risky position to be in.
That lines the path to the first. Possessed, thousands of years of monarchical tradition burned away in the fires of cataclysmic war. Then something tragic happens. It's one of those small tragedies that lines the path to the First World War. Those things that tear you up as you read about these events with perfect hindsight. It's one of those moments that almost makes this seem like a script, like a high drama constructed for the stage, until you realize how real it is, real enough to wipe out a generation. For you see, Sazonov utters the words, "If Austria-Hungary swallows Serbia, we will go to war." Did you catch it? If not, that's alright, neither did Portales. Poor Portales, who so desperately wants to avoid war. You see, Russia's main concern was that Austria would annex Serbia. If the Austrians planned to conquer Serbia, then it had to be war. But remember earlier, when the Austro-Hungarians were arguing among themselves about the ultimatum, that Hungarian element wouldn't lend its voice to war unless the other members of the Austro-Hungarian Empire agreed that they would not annex a foot of Serbian soil. Well, nobody told Portales. He was the German ambassador, not the Austrian ambassador, and somehow the memo never got to him that the Austrians had no plans to actually take over Serbia. So in their whole discussion, he never gets to communicate this to Sazonov. This may be one of the last moments where the world could have avoided this war.
Okay, like, that feels stupid. Like, a lot of this feels stupid, but that feels especially stupid. Sometimes it's just the littlest things, but really, you can't draw it back to any one moment. There's probably a million ways this could have been stopped, but God, it's so fun to wonder what if, though.
Portales impassioned, begging for peace. Sazonov firmly stating the Russian case. The two diplomats meeting in the quiet St. Petersburg night. But the world hinges on small things, and in that gentle night, one of the last the world would know for years, the opportunity is missed. The hands of fate tighten around the neck of Europe. The next day, the Austrians reject demands that they extend the deadline. The Kaiser at last decides to return to Germany, and 2 minutes before the ultimatum expires, the Serbians send Austria their reply. But that's a story for next time. We'll see you then.
Okay, how much more do we got? Hold on, all right. How much more is to this? I'm very excited to see how. I know there's at least one more. I'm not sure. Okay. This gets me kind of in the mood to check out some alternate history stuff, weirdly enough, when you have situations like this, when the littlest things could have impacted it immensely. It makes me kind of want to go down that alternate history rabbit hole, because there's so many great creators who mess around with that stuff. So I might look into that and see if anybody has made any good videos on the subject. That would be a fun way to further explore a period that I'm not all that good with, but it would give me a little bit of room to work out a lot of these hypotheticals and how I feel about them. Because right now, it's kind of hard to tell because I'm so uneducated on the subject, but I'm trying. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like, subscribe for more. I will be doing these pretty frequently, I'm sure. Even when we're done with this series, I hope to continue doing more extra history if you guys keep enjoying them. Like the video, subscribe for more, become a channel member if you want, no pressure, and I will see you guys next time. Later.